"I pay you to clean, not to heal me," the Mafia boss roared. But the black janitor saw the one muscle he couldn't hide. Chapter 1: What the Hand Says. Seoul, 3:07 a.m. The 48th floor of the Yungu Tower was the kind of place that made people feel like they were standing inside money. Black lacquered walls, art that had no price tags because price tags were for people who needed to ask. Zara Mensa pushed her cart out of the service lift and into the silence. 11 months on the night shift rotation. Long enough to know every corner, every camera angle, every door that was never supposed to be open, long enough to be furniture. She worked from east to west on 48. The empty conference rooms first, then the corridor, then the executive suite at the far end that she always did last because it took the longest. And she liked to save the hardest thing for when she was most awake. Tonight, the light under the executive door was on. She knocked twice. Regulation. Pushed the door open with her cart. He was sitting at the far end of a desk that faced the full span of Seoul's skyline. Dark suit, no tie. The jacket was folded over the back of his chair with a precision that suggested the man had never been careless about a single thing in his life. Jin-woo. She did not need the name. The floor told her everything. Nobody sat at this desk except the one man nobody spoke about in the same breath as anyone else. She started on the far corner, back to him. The credenza, the side table, the low shelf with its 2 ceramic pieces. She was always careful not to breathe near. She was moving toward the wastebasket beside his desk when she saw it. His right hand resting on the surface of the desk, a tremor, not a shake, not a spasm. A tremor, a clean, rhythmic micro-oscillation of the fingers, happening and stopping and happening again on a cycle she could have timed with a watch. 3 years of pharmacy school before her visa ran out and her savings ran dry. 3 years of learning what the body does when chemistry goes wrong. This was chemistry, not neurology. The pattern was too regular for progressive nerve disease, too confined to one hand for a systemic condition. She stared one count too long. Jin-woo. "I pay you to clean, not to study me." His voice was flat, not loud. The kind of quiet that has learned it doesn't need volume. She turned back to the wastebasket. "Zara, sorry. I'm done here." She wheeled her cart toward the door. At the threshold, she paused just a half second and listened behind her, the soft sound of him closing his right hand slowly into a fist. As if he could contain it by force of will, he couldn't. Chapter 2. The paper she left. She did not intend to write anything. She rode the bus home in the gray before sunrise, watching the Han River go by, and told herself it was not her business. She was a janitor. She had a work visa with 14 months left on it. She had a room in Mapogu and a sister in Accra whose school fees depended on the money arriving on time every month. She had too many reasons to stay invisible. And still, by the time she reached her building, the words were already forming. She sat at her desk and wrote. Not a letter, a clinical note. Tight, precise, the kind of language she had learned to write for medication interaction reports. She described the tremor, frequency, amplitude, lateralization, confined to the right hand only, repeatable on a rhythmic cycle, absent on the left, no facial involvement, No postural sway, no signs of systemic neurological decline. And then, in the last line, the thing she wasn't supposed to know, consistent with stage 1 organophosphate microexposure. If sourced through regular ingestion, food, beverage, supplement, onset would match 17 to 20 months. This does not resolve on its own. It escalates. She folded the paper. 3 folds tight, wrote nothing on the outside. The next evening, arriving for her shift, she placed it on his desk before he arrived, under the edge of his laptop, visible only if you were looking. She was finishing the conference room at the other end of the floor when his door opened. One of his men came for her, not with aggression, with the specific blankness of a professional carrying a message he had been told to deliver without expression. "Guard, Mr. Siak will see you." She set her mop against the wall and went. Jin-woo was standing when she entered, not sitting, standing behind his desk, the folded paper open in both hands. His right hand held one edge. She watched it. The tremor was present. He either didn't notice or had learned not to react to it. "Jin-woo, where did you study, Zara?" "I didn't finish." "Pharmacy." 3 years. "Jin-woo, you left, Zara." "I had to." He set the paper down. He looked at her the way men who have survived a long time look at new information, not with trust, not with suspicion, but with a careful, weighing attention. "Jin-woo, organophosphate. You're saying someone is poisoning me, Zara." "I'm saying the tremor fits that compound. What you do with that is your business." "Jin-woo, and you decided this was worth losing your job over." She met his gaze. "Zara, I decided that knowing something and saying nothing makes me responsible for what happens next." A long silence. Seoul breathing 48 floors below them. "Jin-woo, who have you told, Zara?" "No one. That note is the only copy." He looked down at the paper. Then he did something she did not expect. He folded it closed again, carefully, along the same 3 creases, and put it in his inside jacket pocket, close to the chest, like something worth keeping. Chapter 3. The father who was not Elder Park Sung-yi had a way of entering rooms as though the room had been waiting for him. He was 63, silver at the temples, the kind of face that other men in the organization described as distinguished, by which they meant too old to threaten, too well connected to dismiss. He had known Jin-woo since the boy was 9 years old, had sat beside the father at every council, had held the seat together in the year between the father's death and Jin-woo's ascension, had called himself the bridge. He had also been the first person to suggest, quietly, to 3 council members over the past year, that the tremor was a concern, that a man whose hand shook could not be fully trusted to hold the organization steady, that perhaps, when the time came to discuss succession, he had been patient. He was very good at patience. He found out about the note on a Wednesday morning. His man on 48 had not seen the note itself, but he had seen the exchange. The woman summoned. The door closed. The conversation that lasted 12 minutes when it should have lasted 1. Elder Park sat in his study, a cedarwood room in a house in Seongbukdong, and turned his evening tea glass slowly in both hands. The tea was from a supplier only he used, a private blend. He had been adding a preparation to Jin-woo's portion for 17 months. Not enough to harm, just enough to maintain. Just enough to make the question open, he made 2 calls. The first to a man who handled complications quietly. The second to Jin-woo himself, to arrange their usual Thursday breakfast, a ritual that had existed for 15 years and would create no suspicion. Elder Park, ON call. Thursday, as always, son. I have something I want to discuss with the council. Nothing urgent. Your guidance would help. Jin-woo agreed. As he always did, Elder Park set the phone down and looked at the tea glass for a long time. Then he picked up the first call again. Elder Park. The night cleaner on 48. I need to understand what she knows and who she has spoken to. Be subtle. She is not to feel pressured. He paused. Elder Park. Not yet. Chapter 4, The Car Park and the Truth. They found her on Thursday evening, 1 level below the building, in the parking structure. 2 men, professional. Not aggressive, that was what she noticed first. Men who have been told to be subtle, look a specific way. They make themselves seem helpful until the moment they don't need to anymore. They said there was an issue with her employment documentation, that someone in HR needed to verify her work authorization in a room she didn't know existed. Zara had heard this kind of language before. Not in Seoul. In a different city, a different building. The same grammar of power. She went with them. But first, she sent a voice memo to one number, 30 seconds of ambient sound, and her own voice saying the level, the time, and one name. Zara voice memo, level B2, Thursday, 9:41 p.m. Elder Park Sungyi. They took her to a utility room at the far end of level B2. Gray walls, a metal chair, a bare bulb. Elder Park was already there. Dramatic pause. He was dressed for dinner. Pocket square. Warm smile. The performance of a reasonable man having a reasonable conversation. Elder Park. Please sit. I won't take much of your time. She sat. She did not smile back. Elder Park. I understand you've been speaking with Mr. Seok about a medical matter. I want you to know I appreciate your concern. Genuinely. But Jin-woo is under excellent care. Whatever you may have observed, I assure you it is being managed. Zara. By who? The same doctor who supplies the evening tea blend. Warmth did not leave his face, but something behind it shifted. Elder Park, you're a clever young woman. Clever enough to understand that some situations are larger than one person's good intentions. Zara. And clever enough to have already sent a recording of the compound name, the delivery method, and your name to someone who will open it if I don't confirm I'm safe. Silence. The 2 men looked at Elder Park. He looked at his hands. Slow, the door behind Zara opened. Jin-woo walked in. Dramatic pause. He looked at Elder Park with an expression that had nothing young left in it. Not anger, not grief, something older than both. The face of a man who has confirmed a thing he has been refusing to believe. In his hand was his phone, playing the 30-second voice memo. Jin-woo, I stopped the tea 4 days ago. I wanted to see what would happen. Elder Park stood slowly. Elder Park, you were never ready to lead alone. I held this organization together while you found your footing. Everything I did, Jin-woo, everything you did was to keep my hand shaking. Room was very still. Elder Park sat back down, not because he was told to, because there was nowhere left to stand. Chapter 5, Steady. The council met on Saturday. Not in the tower. In the old room, a private hall on the ground floor of a members' club in Jongno, that the organization had used for 30 years. Dark wood. A long rectangular table. 11 men who had collectively watched Seok Jin-woo's right hand shake for 17 months and said nothing because saying something was more dangerous than silence. Elder Park sat in his usual chair, third from the head of the table. Jin-woo was the last to enter. He sat at the head of the table and poured himself water without looking at anyone. Then he set a small speaker on the table and pressed play. The voice that came out was the voice of Elder Park's private physician. He had been the one to formulate the compound. He had been the one to instruct the tea supplier. He had documented everything. He was, above all else, a careful man, and careful men leave records. And when Jin-woo's people found those records, the physician had understood immediately that cooperation was the only path with any future at the end of it. He spoke for 4 minutes and 40 seconds around the table. 11 men listened without moving. Elder Park's hands were flat on the table in front of him. He did not speak. He did not look up. He had the look of a man who had spent 19 years building a careful structure and had watched someone pull the single foundational stone. When the recording ended, Jin-woo turned it off. He looked down the table, then he placed his right hand flat on the table, fingers spread, palm down, and held it there. Still, no tremor, no oscillation. 4 days without the tea, and the compound was already clearing. The nerve pathways already returning to their own signal. His hand was completely, absolutely still. Every man at that table had watched it shake. Every man understood in that moment the full weight of what had been done, not just to Jin-woo, but to their own judgment, their own trust, their own quiet willingness to believe what they were shown. Nobody spoke for a long time. Then the gray-haired man at Jin-woo's left, the eldest captain, who had served his father, placed his own hand flat on the table beside Jin-woo's. A gesture with no words needed. One by one, the others followed. Zara was not in the room. She was in the corridor outside, not because she had been invited, but because Jin-woo had called her 2 hours before the meeting and said simply, "Come." She stood on the far side of the glass wall. She could not hear anything, but she watched the moment his hand went down on the table. Watched it hold. She pressed 2 fingers to the glass. Not a wave, not a signal, just the instinct of someone who has spent a long time watching bodies for the thing they cannot fake. His hand was still. The rest was his later, much later, after the room had emptied and the city had gone dark around the tower. He found her in the corridor where she had waited. He did not say thank you. She had known he wouldn't. Men like him didn't navigate that word easily. Instead, he held out his right hand. Open, steady, palm up. Jin-woo, you're going to need a different badge. Zara, I liked my badge. Jin-woo, you're going to need a different one anyway. She looked at his hand. Open, still. The tremor gone as completely as if it had never been there at all. She thought about 17 months, about what patience costs, about what it costs to pretend not to see a thing that is right in front of you. She thought about a note in 3 careful folds, slid under a door at 3 a.m. She placed her hand in his. The end next.